You wake up, you eat, you work, you eat again, you work some more, you come home exhausted, you sleep, and then you do it all over again. Now ask yourself a question. Is this normal? Is this how humans have always lived? Is this the life your body was designed for? The answer might make you uncomfortable. Everything you think you know about the relationship between humans and work is wrong. Your ancestors, the ones who lived before farms and factories and 9-to-5 jobs, they worked less than you, much less. And they had a richer social life, more creative output, and more leisure time than any modern person can imagine. This is not a fantasy. This is the archaeological and anthropological record. Let me start with a man named Marshall Sahlins. In 1972, Sahlins, an anthropologist at the University of Chicago, published a book called Stone Age Economics. In it, he included a chapter with a title that shocked the academic world. He called it The Original Affluent Society. Sahlins argued that hunter-gatherers were the first affluent society, not because they had a lot of things, but because they wanted little and had enough. Affluence, he said, is not about having everything. It is about having everything you need with minimal effort. This was a radical idea in 1972. Economists assumed that pre-agricultural humans lived short, brutal lives of constant labor. Sahlins said the evidence showed the opposite. Hunter-gatherers worked fewer hours, ate better food, and had more free time than any society that came after them. Let me give you the numbers. Frank Marlowe, an anthropologist at Cambridge University, spent years living with the Hadza of Tanzania. The Hadza are one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer groups on Earth. They live in the same region where some of the earliest human fossils have been found. They eat the same foods and follow the same patterns that humans have followed for hundreds of thousands of years. In 2005, Marlowe published his time allocation data. The Hadza adults spent approximately 15 to 20 hours per week acquiring food. That is it. 15 to 20 hours? The rest of their week was free. Let that sink in. 15 to 20 hours of work per week. The typical modern American works 40 to 50 hours per week. The typical modern Chinese worker works even more. Ancient humans, living without any of our technology, worked half as much as you do. James Suzman, a Cambridge anthropologist who spent decades living with the hoansi San of the Kalahari Desert, documented the same pattern. In his 2017 book Affluence Without Abundance, Suzman showed that the San worked about 15 hours per week for subsistence. They spent the remaining hours visiting each other, telling stories, playing games, making music, and simply relaxing. Suzman wrote something that stayed with me. He said that when a modern person imagines prehistoric life, they imagine constant struggle against nature. But when you actually live with hunter-gatherers, what strikes you is not the struggle, it is the calm, the absence of urgency. The long hours of sitting around, talking, laughing, and doing nothing at all. This is not laziness. It is a different relationship with time. Modern people see time as a resource to be used efficiently. Ancient humans saw time as a context for living. So what exactly did ancient humans do with all that free time? Let me start with the most important activity. Socializing. The hoansi San spend a large portion of their day visiting other camps. A typical day might involve walking an hour to a neighboring camp, sitting down, talking for several hours, sharing food. This visiting is not a luxury, it is essential. It maintains the social bonds that hold the group together. Robin Dunbar, a psychologist at Oxford University, has argued that human language evolved specifically to replace physical grooming as a way of maintaining social bonds. Chimpanzees spend hours each day grooming each other, picking parasites from each other's fur. But when humans lost their fur, they could no longer groom. So they invented language. Dunbar's theory, published in his 1998 book Grooming, Gossip, and the Evolution of Language, suggests that most human conversation is social gossip. Who is doing what? Who is sleeping with whom? Who can be trusted? Who cannot? This is not trivial. It is the social glue that holds communities together. When you imagine ancient humans sitting around talking, you are imagining the most important activity in human evolution. Those conversations built the trust that made cooperation possible. And cooperation is what made humans dominant. And here is another dimension of leisure that rarely gets discussed: gender and free time. In hunter-gatherer societies, men typically hunt and women gather. Men's work is more dangerous, but less steady. Women's work is more consistent, but less intense. The result is that women and men have different amounts and types of leisure, but the overall pattern is the same. Both men and women in hunter-gatherer societies work fewer hours than their agricultural and industrial counterparts. A Hadza woman gathering tubers and berries works about 15 hours a week. A forager man hunting game works about 20 hours. The difference is small. The free time is abundant. Now, let me ask you a question that might bother you. If ancient humans had so much free time, why did they not invent more things? Why did it take them tens of thousands of years to develop agriculture, writing, and cities? The answer is that they did invent things. They just invented different things. They invented complex social systems that maintained peace without government. They invented mythologies that explained the natural world without science. They invented artistic traditions that communicated identity without writing. They invented music that bonded communities without concerts. These are not failures. These are achievements. And they were made possible by the same thing that made everything else possible: time. Now, let me talk about something that happened after dark. Polly Wiesner, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, conducted a landmark study in 2014. She analyzed thousands of conversations among the hoansi San, comparing what people talked about during the day versus what they talked about at night. The results were stunning. During the day, conversations were practical: where to find water, who had extra food, what needed to be fixed. Daytime talk was about getting through the day. At night, around the fire, everything changed. Over 80% of nighttime conversations shifted to stories, songs, ceremonies, and what Wiesner called firelight talk. People told myths. They recounted past hunts. They sang. They danced. They talked about spirits and ancestors. This shift from practical to spiritual, from individual to collective, is what Wiesner believes drove the evolution of human culture. The fire was not just for warmth and cooking. It was the first theater, the first cinema, the first church. Let me give you a specific example. One night, Wiesner recorded a Sandman named Funkunta telling a story about how fire was stolen from the gods. The story lasted 40 minutes. It involved a mantis, a hyena, a lost child, and a burning stick that could not be extinguished. The entire group sat in silence, listening, except when they burst into laughter or gasped at a dramatic moment. This is not entertainment. It is education. It is identity formation. It is the transmission of values, history, and worldview from one generation to the next. Every Netflix show you watch, every movie you see, every story you read is a descendant of those fireside tales. Let me give you another example of how ancient people spent their time. The ache of Paraguay. Kim Hill and Magdalena Hurtado, anthropologists at the University of New Mexico, spent years living with the ache in the 1980s and 1990s. They documented the time allocation of ache men and women in extraordinary detail, and they found the same pattern. Ache adults spent approximately 20 hours per week on subsistence. The rest was leisure. But what the ache did with their leisure is different from the Hadza and the San. The ache spend more time on long-distance visiting. A family might walk for 2 days to visit another band. They stay for weeks. The visiting season in the ache calendar is a period of intense social activity, storytelling, and marriage negotiations. This is not an exception. It is the rule. Across the world, hunter-gatherers use their free time to maintain social networks that extend far beyond their immediate group. These networks are insurance policies. If your local area runs out of food, you need relatives in another area who will take you in. The visiting that looks like leisure to a modern observer is actually a sophisticated risk management strategy. Let me now talk about something that rarely gets mentioned. Play. Dean Falk, an anthropologist at Florida State University, has studied the role of play in human evolution. In her 2004 work on prelinguistic evolution, Falk argued that play was essential for the development of human cognition. Play teaches social rules. It teaches negotiation. It teaches creativity. It teaches the capacity to imagine alternative realities. Ancient humans did not just play as children. They played as adults. The archaeological record shows that board games are ancient. The royal game of Ur, found in Iraq and dating to 4,600 years ago, is one of the oldest known board games. But the tradition of games is far older. Game boards carved into stone have been found at sites across the world. The Hadza play a game called Lukuchuko, where they try to hit each other with sticks while dodging. The San play a game involving a poisoned arrow and a complex system of social bets involving who can find it first. These games are not just fun. They train the skills needed for survival. Dodging, aiming, reading social signals, managing risk. Let me talk about art. The cave paintings of Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira are not the work of people who had no free time. They are the work of people who had enough free time to develop extraordinary artistic skill. The paintings at Chauvet Cave in France are 36,000 years old. They show horses, lions, rhinoceroses, and mammoths with a level of artistic sophistication that was not matched until the Renaissance. The artists understood perspective. They understood shading. They understood how to represent movement. Jean Clotz, the former director of research at the French Ministry of Culture, studied these paintings for decades. He estimated that a single panel in Chauvet Cave would have taken hundreds of hours to complete, hundreds of hours of work that had nothing to do with survival, work that was purely creative, purely expressive, purely human. This is not a society of people barely clinging to life. This is a society of people with enough leisure to become master artists. Now, let me talk about music. The oldest known musical instrument is a flute made from a vulture bone, found at the Geisenkloster Cave in Germany. It is 42,000 years old. The flute has 5 finger holes and can still produce a scale that sounds musical to modern ears. Flutes from the same period have been found at sites across Europe. The Holy Fels flute from the Swabian Jura region of Germany, discovered in 2008 by a team led by Dr. Nicholas Conard at the University of Tübingen, is carefully carved from a griffon vulture bone. The maker understood acoustics. They understood the relationship between hole placement and pitch. They understood music. Let me ask you a question. When do people have time to sit around carving flutes and figuring out musical scales? When they are not spending all their time looking for food. The abundance of musical instruments in the Paleolithic record tells us something important. Music was not a luxury. It was a central part of ancient life. It may have been used for rituals, for social bonding, for entertainment, for courtship. But it existed because people had the time to create it. The music of the Paleolithic was not limited to flutes. Percussion instruments made from bones and wood have been found at sites across Europe and Africa. Drums made from animal skins stretched over hollow logs were probably used. Rattles made from dried gourds with seeds inside. The human voice itself, the oldest instrument, was used for singing. Dr. Ian Morley at Oxford University has argued that music and dance were central to Paleolithic ritual life. In his 2003 study, The Evolutionary Origins and Archaeology of Music, Morley showed that musical activities leave few archaeological traces, but are universally present in hunter-gatherer societies. The absence of evidence of absence. The music was there. It just decayed. Imagine a group of ancient humans sitting around a fire. Someone starts tapping a rhythm on a hollow log. Someone else joins in with a rattle made from a dried gourd. A third person begins to sing. The rhythm syncs. The voices merge. The group is no longer a collection of individuals. It is a single entity, moving and breathing together. This is what music does. It creates social cohesion. It synchronizes brain waves. It releases oxytocin, the bonding chemical, and it was happening 40,000 years ago because people had the time to make it happen. Let me now talk about something that anthropologists call the original social network. Storytelling. The evidence of storytelling in prehistory goes beyond the ethnographic record of modern hunter-gatherers. It is written in our biology. The human brain is wired for narrative. We think in stories. We remember in stories. We communicate in stories. Dr. Jeremy De Silva at Dartmouth College has argued that the capacity for storytelling was a key selective advantage for early humans. It allowed the transmission of complex information across generations. Where to find water during a drought. How to make a fire during a storm. Which animals were dangerous and which were prey. Storytelling was practical, but it was also social. A good storyteller was a valued member of the group. The ability to captivate an audience with a tale was a form of social capital. It increased your status. It attracted mates. It made people want to be around you. The Jew hoansi San have a tradition called the strong talk. A strong talk is a speech delivered by an elder to the group, usually at night around the fire. The elder recounts the history of the group, the deeds of ancestors, and the lessons learned from past mistakes. The strong talk can last for hours. Everyone listens. This is how knowledge was preserved without writing. This is how culture was transmitted without schools. This is how identity was maintained without passports or borders. And it happened during hours that modern people spend scrolling through social media. Let me talk about another unexpected leisure activity. Making things. Ancient humans spent a lot of time making things that were not strictly necessary. Beads, necklaces, carved figurines, decorated tools. The earliest known jewelry consists of shell beads found at Bloomsbury cave in South Africa, dating to 75,000 years ago. These beads were carefully pierced, strung, and worn. Ian Tattersall at the American Museum of Natural History has argued that these symbolic objects are among the most important clues to the origin of modern human cognition. A shell bead has no practical function. It does not help you hunt. It does not help you gather. It does not keep you warm. But it does something more important. It communicates identity. I am part of this group. I have this status. I have this relationship. The bead is a symbol, and the capacity for symbolic thought is what makes humans unique. The time spent making these beads was time spent expressing identity, building social relationships, and exercising creativity. It was work, but it was also leisure. Now let me talk about an activity that is invisible in the archaeological record, but central to every known hunter-gatherer society. Rest. The Hadza take naps. They sleep during the hottest part of the day. They sit in the shade and stare at the landscape. They do nothing, and they do it for hours. Modern people feel guilty about doing nothing. We call it procrastination. We call it wasting time. We have internalized the idea that every moment must be productive. Ancient humans did not have this problem. They understood something that we have forgotten. Doing nothing is not a waste of time. It is a necessary part of being human. It gives the brain time to process information. It gives the body time to recover. It gives the spirit time to breathe. Zubizarreta at Columbia University has studied the role of rest in cognitive function. He calls it the power of pause. The brain consolidates memories during rest. It makes creative connections. It solves problems that it could not solve while actively working. This is not laziness, it is biology, and your ancestors understood it intuitively. Now let me talk about the transition that changed everything: agriculture. Let me talk about something that the Hadza understand better than any modern executive: the value of napping. The Hadza sleep in 2 shifts. They go to bed after dark, wake up in the middle of the night for a few hours of socializing, and then sleep again until dawn. In between, they nap during the hottest part of the day. This polyphasic sleep pattern is common in traditional societies. Roger Kirk at Virginia Tech has documented the history of sleep in pre-industrial Europe. He found that segmented sleep, with a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night, was the norm before the Industrial Revolution. People woke up in the middle of the night to pray, to chat, to have sex, and to visit neighbors. The single 8-hour block of sleep is a modern invention. The middle of the night wake period was called the watch in medieval England. It was a time for quiet reflection, intimate conversation, and creative thinking. Some historians believe that Shakespeare wrote many of his sonnets during these waking periods. The quiet hours of the night, when no one was working, were the most creative hours of the day. Around 10,000 years ago, humans began farming. The shift from hunting and gathering to agriculture is often described as a great leap forward. But Sahlins and others have argued that agriculture was actually a great leap backward in terms of quality of life. The evidence is stark. Early farmers were shorter than hunter-gatherers. Their bones show more signs of malnutrition. Their teeth have more cavities. Their life expectancy was shorter. They worked longer hours for food that was less nutritious than what their ancestors had eaten. Jared Diamond, in his 2012 book, The World Until Yesterday, called Agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. It was not a deliberate choice. It was a slow, invisible trap. People gradually became more dependent on a few domesticated crops. As the population grew, they could not go back. The result was a dramatic reduction in leisure time. Hunter-gatherers worked 15 to 20 hours per week for food. Early farmers worked 40 to 50 hours per week, and the quality of the work changed. Hunting and gathering are varied, engaging, and physically stimulating. Farming is repetitive, monotonous, and physically exhausting. James Scott at Yale University has written about how the shift to agriculture changed the human experience of time. Hunter-gatherers work in bursts. They respond to immediate needs. They have no concept of next week's schedule. Farmers, on the other hand, live by the calendar: planting season, harvest season, the relentless cycle of the agricultural year. This is where the modern experience of time originated. Not in the Paleolithic, not in the world of hunter-gatherers, but in the fields of the Neolithic. Your sense that time is scarce, that you never have enough hours in the day, that you must constantly produce something. This is not ancestral. It is agricultural. And then came the Industrial Revolution. The factory whistle replaced the rooster. The clock replaced the sun. Work became measured in hours, not tasks, and leisure became a problem to be managed, rather than a natural part of life. The evidence for this decline in well-being after the adoption of agriculture comes from paleopathology, the study of ancient disease. Dr. Clark Spencer Larson at Ohio State University has shown that the transition to agriculture caused a measurable decline in human health. Farmers had more dental cavities, more malnutrition, more infectious diseases, and shorter stature than hunter-gatherers. But the decline in leisure was probably the most consequential change. When you lose free time, you lose the capacity for creativity, social bonding, and rest. You become a machine for production, rather than a human being living a life. The San have a saying: if a man has food, he sits down and eats it. He does not gather more. This saying reflects a fundamental value that was lost with agriculture. Enough is enough. You do not need more. Think about your own life. How many hours this week did you spend sitting around doing nothing? How many hours did you spend talking to friends and family without checking your phone? How many hours did you spend making something that had no practical purpose but brought you joy? If you are like most modern people, you are busier than your ancestors, you are more stressed, you have less free time, and yet you have machines that do most of the work for you. How is this possible? It is possible because modern society has created artificial needs that eat up the time that technology was supposed to save. You do not need to work 50 hours a week. You need to work 50 hours a week to afford the things you have been told you need. The car, the subscription services. Your ancestors did not have these expenses. They did not have rent. They did not have mortgages. They did not have streaming subscriptions. They had food, shelter, and each other. And they had time. Let me bring this back to you. You live in a world that demands constant productivity. Your phone buzzes with notifications. Your email inbox fills up. Your calendar is packed. You feel guilty when you sit still. But your body and brain are still calibrated for a different world. A world where you worked 15 hours a week and spent the rest of your time talking, playing, making art, telling stories, and doing nothing at all. The restlessness you feel on a Sunday afternoon when you have nothing to do is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are living in a world that does not match your biology. Your ancestors had it right. They worked less. They played more. They told stories by firelight. They made music from vulture bones. They sat in the shade and watched the world go by. You are not lazy for wanting to rest. You are human. Rest is your birthright.